All right, I think we will go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for being here and welcome. Welcome to the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference. I'm Alice Egan and I'm happy that you're here for this breakout presentation with Dr. Sakara Wages and Jeremy J.P. Vincent Payne. To share a visual description of myself, I'm a middle-aged white woman with chin-length brown hair with a black collared shirt with small white polka dots. As we begin, I would like to again share our university's land acknowledgement. The University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work occupy ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Dejo since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. Thank you. Next, a few quick housekeeping notes. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on our conference website at a later date. Before I introduce our speakers, a few Zoom info items. To access this presentation, you are required to provide your name and email. This allows us to log our attendees and email you information on CEUs for this presentation, which will be distributed by email at a later date. Your cameras and microphones will remain muted. We have a Q&A feature where you can submit questions for our presenters. Please know that due to the large volume of attendees, we will not be able to get to all the questions submitted. It is my pleasure now to introduce our presenters, Dr. Sakara Wages and Jeremy Vincent Payne. We are so fortunate to have them here today for this discussion. I want to read just briefly from their breakout description. In the legacy of Black women in the helping tradition, both Black serving social work and subversive social work are forms of institutional social work that work to eradicate pervasive colonial norms and institutions while protecting group survival. In order to protect Black communities from state violence while providing social services, one must enact humanizing departures to harmful policies and practice. This presentation will discuss how embedding principles of love, care, dignity, joy, and protection in social service delivery can shift prevailing norms and foster a more equitable environment. I will now turn it over to our presenters to further introduce themselves and share a bit more about their background and start the session today. We're so delighted that you both are here.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you for having us. I'm Sakara Wages. I am a Black woman with waist-length dreadlocks and a black sweater with red borders that says UW-Madison School of Social Work.
And I'm Jeremy Payne. I'm a Black man with black curly hair that's currently in a bun. I have glasses. I'm wearing a black sweater, blue jean jacket, dark wash with black pants that you can barely see from that level.
And today our presentation is called Fuck It, We'll Do It, Censoring Black Women in a Model of Subversive Social Work. And I know y'all heard the description, but I promise you it's not as intimidating as that may sound. We had to turn that in a long time ago. So we're here today. I also appreciate that Alice sort of started us off with the mention of colonization, because we will continue to roll on that train and talk about the legacy of coloniality. And I would like to dedicate today's presentation to Dr. Antoinette Candia Bailey in memory of her, right? And specifically because Dr. Bailey was a person who spent her life and her research trying to essentially embody the spirit of fuck it, I'll do it, right? Her dissertation was called My Sister, Myself, the identification of the socio-cultural factors that affect the advancement of African-American women into senior level administrative positions. So what likely happened is, as Dr. Candia Bailey ascended to leadership, right, she had noticed all of these factors and barriers that she transcended. And in doing so, right, I want to recognize that while we embody that spirit, that spirit has a cost, right? When you just up and say, I'll do it. And I want to hold space today for those costs associated with that spirit, right? Um, and so, yeah, I dedicate this to Dr. Candia Bailey. Um, our agenda today, pretty much, we are going to talk a little bit about my dissertation research, where I center Black women who have always practiced social work in ways that had to subvert the state violence, right? And they did so to ensure our survival as a group and to change the institutions that govern us. And our second aim is to provide examples of how we here at Subversive Social Work, our spot, act in the legacy of Black women and helping tradition. My hope is that out of our Q&A, we can sort of dream a little bit past coloniality, talk a little bit, maybe ideate some, but we'll see what comes there. So before we get into it, I just want to give a little bit of background and sort of continue on the train of coloniality, right? You may not have heard that before, but the United States is a settler colonial society, right? And in being that, it's marginalized and erased the perspectives of Black people in social work. The implications of that erasure, right, go deep in as much as practitioners, students, researchers, and the families we serve are all affected by this erasure and this marginalization. And we have an example of that here.
And so now we would like to take some time to look at the screen and really just slow down and take it all in. And so here we have diverse Black women representation here. And I want you to kind of sift through the names and think for a little bit. As you sit and think, answer the question for yourself. Are you familiar with the faces? Do the names jump out? Can you make any connections back to your life, your lived experiences, those sort of things? Just sit with it for a little bit.
Especially if you have a social work degree, right? If you have a BSW, MSW, or a PhD in social work or social welfare, I'd like you to really ask yourself, do any of these names look familiar to you? Right? And I'll read them. Harriet Jacobs, Katie Ferguson, Mary Ellen Pleasant, Maggie Lena Walker, Ida Barnett Wells, Nanny Burroughs, Bertie Haynes, Janie Porter Barrett, and Addie Hunton. And then finally, Frederica Douglass Sprague Perry. Right?
And so these are women who are Black women serving in the traditional ways. And these are names that are often not always at the forefront of the mindset to attribute this sort of work. And so Jane Addams is historically and in many ways contemporarily is attributed as the mother of social work. And so the women that you see here are women who have been doing the work well before it was even thought of or conceived, as a thing.
Right. And so I'll just talk a little bit about some of the institutions that these women founded. Janie Porter founded the Virginia Industrial School for Colored Girls. The National Training School for Women and Girls was founded by Nanny Burroughs. Frederica Douglass Sprague Perry is the daughter of Frederick Douglass, and her sister Rosabelle were founding members of the National Association of Colored Women. And then finally, Ida B. Wells opened the Negro Fellowship League in Reading Room, which also served as a settlement house. And here they had a whole host of activities, including job training, job placement. They even had manhood development activities. But most importantly, they made space for recreation and block parties and things of that nature, right? And so when we look at those names, and we realized, me personally, I didn't see any of these names until I did my dissertation, right? That meant ultimately that I had not been exposed to Black social work.
Yeah. And so the ladies who are listed in purple, are women who have been doing this work under state violence. And so the Fugitive Slave Act was very much so a thing at the time that they were still doing this sort of work.
Right. And so the Fugitive Slave Act made it illegal for you to interact or sort of intervene on behalf of somebody fleeing human trafficking, right? And these women in purple, regardless of that being illegal to do so and supporting quote unquote escaped slaves, i.e., liberated human chattel, they still did the work of providing material supports, material goods, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like I said, when these systems fail Black women, right? Essentially, when the systems, when the government, when slavery existed, Black women stepped up and said, fuck it, I'll do it. I'm going to take care of my people, regardless of the legality, right? Whether it's illegal or not. Yeah.
So I'm just going to read this off really quickly. Until the United States government social welfare system emerged in the 1930s, social welfare activities for Black people were part of the helping traditions that predate slavery. Until then, Black women had been primary in ensuring the care and sustenance of Black people as a means of group survival and resistance to intersecting oppressions.
So before social work as a field existed, before social work or welfare as a concept sort of emerged, Black people were ensuring the survival of other Black people. And that comprises what we call the Black helping tradition. And so, like I sort of alluded to earlier, if you had never been exposed to none of those names in that list, and you were not aware that Black serving social work was going on in communities prior to the emergence of social work, then that means, right, that the majority of mainstream social work is really social work, right? Because it has failed to incorporate the norms, the values, the motivations behind why Black people serve other Black people. So I noticed that in grad school and in the legacy of Black women in the helping tradition, I said, fuck it, and did it. I wrote my dissertation, and it was sort of a first epistemic intervention to disrupt and correct the marginalization and erasure of those women and other Black women in the Black helping tradition. And my major findings was that Black women have different motivations behind why they serve. They get into social work to sort of change things and ensure their survival. They have different values undergirding the way they serve their communities, and they have different norms that govern the ways they serve their communities. My other major finding was that all of those sort of differences fell into 3 or 4 pots, right? So you have Black women create these institutions, these spheres of influence, right? Where in these spheres of influence, they become sort of repositories of knowledge, right? Repositories of shared information. And they also protect one another, support one another's independence, and support one another's restoration, right? And while this sort of schematic shows them independently, they aren't mutually exclusive. The same activities that were done for protection and restoration might have also been done for independence sake, as we'll see momentarily. And so in terms of independence, the Black women in the helping tradition typically did things to promote economic empowerment. They built institutions, and as you saw in some of the institutions that I named, they supported the advocate and advancement of Black women and girls, right? In terms of protection, the reason that they wanted to build those less harmful institutions was essentially to protect from racism, sexism, and misogynoir, right? I think about Maggie Lena Walker, who the banks that she opened, she paid the Black clerks, the Black women clerks, the most that any Black person was being paid in her community at the time, right? And so while that was done, for economic empowerment, it was also done for protection, because the workplace for a Black woman during that time was very, very hostile. And then finally, in restoration, as I sort of said with Ida B. Wells, they centered joy, centered play, holistic care, and made sure that recreation and rec rooms were a part of sort of their praxis. Because the idea is that I can't interact and intervention on somebody who's broken, right? I need to recognize that the conditions of racism, sexism, misogynoir, et cetera, right? Ableism, poverty, all of those conditions take a toll on you. And if I'm expecting you to quote unquote do something with yourself, you got to heal that piece first. And so Black women in the helping tradition recognized that, and they created and saved and fomented spaces for that restoration as an integral part of their praxis. And so basically, that is subversive social work, right? The theory there is the praxis in which my organization stands. The things that we'll talk about in a moment and will demonstrate exactly how we work in the legacy of Black women in the helping tradition.
And so one thing I just want to say, to bring a moment full circle, Sakara and I have met each other in, I want to say 2020, and we've been working alongside each other in friendship, as well as different endeavors. And so subversive social work has been one of the greatest things that we could take on in this time that we currently live. And so one thing I just want to share about subversive social work is that this is like a culmination, right, of a long list of lived experience, expertise, right? A long list of love, a long list of
Church talks and shoes and peer
Oh,
places, right? I
right.
think, thank you for saying that,
Yes.
because theorizing doesn't just happen in these classrooms, in these spaces. We did a lot of our theorizing on the porch,
Sure.
So
So we had to dream up a way to have this stuff transfer and have it happen and matter in our community. And so Sakara was already ahead of the curve. Subversive social work was in place. And so it served as the strategy, right? The ideas, the visions, the ways, the frameworks, give us the tools to be able to do the work well in our highly local community. And so subversive social work is at the helm, I would say. And then next, Black Platteville Community Network is an entity that emerged in the rise of 2020. I would say it was racial health pandemic. And it was a time where our diverse Black community were looking for ways to do something and be responsive to the times and have a good thing play out. And so, to no surprise, Black women across our entire city were the first to be like, yeah, let's collect the minds, let's get in a room, let's kick this love talk, and let's think about some ways to pool resources and have our minds come together and come up with initiatives and things to do for it.
real quick, it wasn't getting the room. It's let's sit at the park.
That part. Yeah.
I just want to be clear that our stuff don't happen in rooms. And that's part of supporting sort of the leadership of Black and brown folks, recognizing that it may look different because it has to, right? So our first meeting was in a park, not in a room.
Yes. Thank you, Star, for highlighting that. And so subversive social work is the strategy, is the brain behind it. Black Platteville Community Network is the pooling of resources. It's a network. It's we say famously online, friends helping friends in collective care framework. And so it works for us. And then more recently, Sakara has been gracious to extend herself in many ways. And so she knew that we were working, we're building this thing, we're having these wonderful experiences. We needed a home, right, to really house this thing and be able to do our things, but not only for ourselves, but also to extend that to our community for different things that they had in mind for what they wanted to see happen in our small town Platteville. And so if I'm not correct, right, our spot would be considered the first to the region or the area to be an institutional social work entity.
We the first institutional social work agency to exist. And so, yeah.
And that's a big
You
deal.
can Google that.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And so I think I'll be able to listen.
Yep.
And so next, we just wanted to simply talk about some of the ways in which some of the work that we do show up in the Black women traditions of independence, protection, and what's that third one I always lose, restoration. And so some examples of, well, let me read it off first maybe, and then we jump over to some of the notes we talked about. And so for independence, we have things in our community where we're promoting entrepreneur opportunities for small business development. And the one that comes to mind is myself, actually. Sakara has been gracious to extend and walk with me arm in arm to start up my small business. And it's called not Black Platteville. Child, we so collective. Sometimes the names just mix, but it's My Black Carrot. Is a mentoring entity that I wanted to come up with because I wanted to reconceptualize what it meant for mentoring. Is that still an appropriate term or phrase to describe it? Is it effective? And so I wanted to provide that for my community. And so Sakara was gracious and extended me resources and tools and conversations for starting up a small business that I'm currently developing.
And to be fair, I had to do that because it was Sabrina Madison who told me, so don't you have your LLC? And when she did, I was like, oh, I need to get that. And so I've only been paying it forward. And I think that's a testament to this sort of Black women in the helping tradition and creating these spheres of influence. Like, hey, you don't have this? Oh, you should, right?
Facts. And so we have other things that are happening in Platteville, such as like micro businesses. We have particular scenarios of supporting and helping some folks. The one I think about for independence and support for our community is we had a young college scholar who was indeed, he was trying to get out of here. He was a student for a while, and he was working with campus advisors and different entities of support to figure out what was the pathway to graduate. And so there were a lot of barriers there that seem insurmountable, like just incredibly huge for him. Insurmountable.
Yeah.
Did I get it right?
Yeah.
And so they
had him enrolled for a whole nother semester, essentially, like a whole semester that was superfluous because we looked at his grades and we went through his advising sort of documents and realized that all he needed was the ability to do an independent study. And we were able to get him to sort of some of the work he had already done to qualify as that. And he graduated that semester. They had him scheduled for a whole nother semester, right? And so for us, it was like, let's get him free of this institution. It may not be the degree that you want, but it's a degree. Let's get you free.
Yeah. And so it was a collective minds pooling the resources, working our partnerships across campus, and really mobilizing people to rally this vision and come up off some things, right, that were very simple, but because folks do things that the way they've been done, they just miss it. And so we've been able to accomplish that.
To the end of coming up off some things, that's what helped us start our community garden. So we had a master gardener in our area who works with other Black organizations in the broader Wisconsin area. And essentially we came up with a way to, I rented some community plots, and the master gardener helped us to actualize them and provide, material food resources in addition to our community freezer that we already had. And it was just very little effort, right, on either one of our behalves to sort of do this initiative that allow folks to eat and free up some of their funds elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think this was one of those examples where we found that like it's independence, it's protection, and it's restoration. Because at that garden, I remember when I'm a new father, I have a daughter who's 1 and some change, and I was running out of. You said we can't curse or can curse?
A little bit.
We curse a little bit. I was running out of shit to do at home. And so I had to get my daughter outside and play in dirt and like do things. And Sakara said, she always told me, chase that down, have that experience. And so not only were we providing food to our community, like there was this restoration space that was incredible. And it was peaceful, relaxing. We had elders in our community who were close in proximity as well. And so we were having this crossover, cool experience play out. And it's all interconnected, truly.
Yep. And so to the other sibling, right? I'm playing with this term. So Black women, traditionally Black scholars have coined the terms daughtering and other mothering, right? But me personally, Dr. Wages, I'm pushing back against the gender construct and the existence of it and the need for it. And so I've been playing with this term other siblinging. And I think that is a real pathway to independence, right? Because it allows two people and to share resources in a non-hierarchical manner, right? That will help you sort of get forward. So, like we started with, I gave JP all the games, so I'm like, go start your thing, right? And so was that mentoring or was it other siblinging, right? And then finally, the authentic representation and just showing up how you are encourages others to get free. I like to say, I like to say I'm spreading embers by just coming in rooms sometime, and even he asked, can we curse? And I'm like, a little bit, because at the end of the day, if Dr. Wages can curse and Dr. Wages, it was a paper actually called Fuck Nuance that made me say, oh, I can do that. And I did it, right? And so that encourages you to get free of even the constraints of language structures, right? Okay. On to protection.
Yeah, so for protection, we had a lot of things play out through Subversive Social Work and Black Platteville Community Network, through our resource of our home, at our spot in Platteville. And so one of the things that come to mind, one of my favorites are our block parties that we host. We have a whole framework that we've established, built, and we continue to kind of remold and adapt it and respond to the ever-changing landscape of some of the social oppressions that exist out here in these streets. And so one of the block parties that come to mind, I think of, is our Juneteenth event that we host, as well as our barbecue, grill, and chill events. And so typically when we host these events, we think structurally about how to position like items that are cemented within the whole program, or not a program, but an experience. And so typically we would have our children or our youth position either close edge or deep center in the middle. And then we have adults, caretakers, lovers, all sort of adults, surrounding, to protect, to make sure that, they're surrounded in love and care and won't have to worry about existing in their play and worry about the gaze of our local community.
That allows us to sort of protect them from the potential of traumatic experiences, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of another thing in connection to these sort of events. We have like diverse community representation that typically show up. And from time to time, we have local public safety, law enforcement, who just want to walk through and show up, pop out, and present themselves. And so in preparation for this, like truly knowing that it is likely to happen, you know, we're on standby and we have our allies and or white folks who are present. We make the announcement because they don't do it on their own. They need that prompting, that announcement. And we have them stand up and get busy, right? Stand in front, create that line, and maybe take on some of that emotional labor, that comes with the interaction back and forth.
Absolutely. And to add a little bit of context, we have 392 Black people in Platteville. So we know each other. We all, there are 6 degrees of separation. And what that also means is that the children, the potential for just seeing police sometimes can be traumatic, especially in a space where we're trying to center and create joy. And we get that the public safety, y'all just want to surveil and see the scene and show yourself and positive interactions. But we recognize that may have a negative effect sort of on our youth because of interactions that they have. So we do a lot of work around insulating them from potential police traumas and any other drama as well.
Did you want to hit that CPS truancy?
Oh yeah. So in Platteville, speaking of highly local sort of context, in Platteville, there is this sort of pipeline where if you or your child are truant, meaning late to class or to school, you can and will be referred to CPS, Child Protective Services. And so here, through Black Platteville and through our spot, we noticed that was happening. And because I've done child welfare research, I recognize that we had the opportunity to sort of stave off a surveillance opportunity from that, because the workers really didn't want to go into the homes, right? They often showed up like, we don't know why we're referred here. The pipeline is sort of set up that way, but that didn't deter them from taking through and making assumptions about people's home life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So one way that we protect folks in our community is by allowing them to have meetings in this space, which sort of equalizes power, and it has me, or one of our other advocates present, so that that person doesn't feel alone. And there's been, since this is not just CPS, there's also like other meetings where, like, our housing department, for instance, is located in the municipal building, and if somebody's getting emotionally expressive because they're not understanding why their rent is raised, they might have the police called on them, right? And so by having that interaction here, we're able to protect them from the potential of those interactions as well. And moving on to how restoration shows up in our work.
And so for restoration, it's holistic care, it's elevating love, it's elevating joy and play at every turn, at every possibility that we can explore. And so through the work, we have been outside, like outside. We've had some phenomenal experiences, and I get a little emotional thinking about it because um, it's real, it's love, and like we hot air balloons in the summer,
Yeah.
lakes and camping events, horseback riding, archery, like swim events.
Randomly getting pulled over with a boat full of 8 Black children by the river police.
Oh,
Didn't know how it was the river police, y'all. They pulled us over trying to have an event. There has been so many moments where
there's a lot. It's a lot.
So yeah.
And we elevate that, through love, through play, through joy. But then we also introduce these institutional spaces as well that we navigate.
Absolutely. And I think too, this is also where the dignity piece comes in, right? Like, you can do something and throw it together, but is it really a space for restoration? Right? Like, when somebody can walk into a space where where it's dignified and they've been considered, they're much more likely, to be able to uptake the intervention that you set forward, right? And so yeah, or there may not even be a need for an intervention, because maybe they were just expressing or exhibiting the effects of all the harm that they've taken on, right? Maybe after that dignified restoration space, they can go live in peace. And so I think, while this is the last one, it for me is the most important to protect. And it's the most important to push institutions to change and lighten up. We play all day and get so much work done. When I try, and that's why it was really important for me to emphasize that our stuff doesn't happen in the rooms. When we forced to go in the room, that actually sort of staves off our thinking processes. When we out in nature, I be coming up with metaphors about trees taking over houses and birds, like, things that don't exist in rooms, right? And so restoration and nature, joy, play, and dignity, they all sort of they work together, and it helps us to heal from all of, not just the oppression that we're experiencing in our current lifetime, but our epigenetic, right, oppression and wounds, right, our sort of soul wounds and trauma that we carry generationally, right? And so until we demand that the field of social work incorporates, right, restoration, protection, all of those norms into social work, it's gonna stay white social work. Just saying. And so, that leads me to my next point here, is that the reason Black women build and lead our own institutions, right, is so that we can ensure our group's survival by protecting us, by ensuring that we got what we need so we don't have to depend on nobody where they can pull a rug from under us, and from allowing us to space to rest our souls for a minute, right? All of that, when we get good and we standing on it. Now we can do institutional change, right? And so that's why we have created historically organizations, and that's why we currently create organizations.
Gonna go viral. I'm
You're so
telling you
funny.
right now.
All right, so Yeah, that's all we got for you. We really don't want to talk about us. I wanna know how folks are feeling. Before we get into the Q&A, if can we use the Q&A for like feeling spaces? Because I want to know how people feeling.
All right, come on with it, y'all. Come on, y'all. Come on, get into it.
Let me see. I gotta come this way. Oh, we seeing love. All right, we love y'all too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some questions that we will get to. Okay, we seeing some love. Hey
Come
y'all,
on with the love.
girl,
y'all.
we see you.
Come on.
We could talk. If you want to get on my calendar, just email me. My email is on the end. Here's the thing: I always got time for Black and brown women. I will put aside whatever these institutions asking me to do to make time for you, sis. And because I started this, yeah, we gonna circle back. We ain't done with that. So thank you. Thank y'all. Um, okay, so we see some questions in here. I would love to hear more about how you came up with the presentation title. It's almost discouraging me from attending because I was like, Black women are tired of doing it. Yeah, so I came up with the title, not saying it was suggesting that we should, but saying that we do and have done. So the title was the title of my first dissertation paper, and that was the spirit that these women took on as they sort of came up to a barrier and said, okay, y'all won't do it, US government, y'all won't have social welfare to 1930s. Okay, we'll do it. Okay, you see us as slaves and won't feed us and will do horrible things to us and
Right.
see what's the least amount of food that you can feed us to get the most labor out of us.
Right.
If that's what you gonna do, fuck it, I'll take care of my community. Also, when you think about the structure of slavery, there was this thing where you may have been taking care of children who weren't yours, right? This other mothering thing. Nobody complained when slave children came on. They was just like, you know what, fuck it, I'll do it, right? That's just what it was. One of the things that they did, and I think was the biggest findings, was that in the three narratives that I drew from in my dissertation, all three women grew up not knowing the three Black women pre 1850 grew up not knowing slavery existed. So some other mother protected them from the conditions of human chattel because they had to. They just did it. There was no question. So that's sort of the thoughts behind the title. And if it discouraged you, I encourage you to sit with that, because the word fuck is just four letters that are put together with accepted connotations, right? And what connotations are you putting on them and why? Ask yourself that. The English language constricts us. I found myself I tell my students, my first language is AAVE. So you got to give me a minute to translate, right? So yeah, that was a little bit of an aside. Sorry,
No,
Rosalind, but I'm glad you joined us. I'm glad you're here, and I hope that was helpful. And we can talk, girl. I love you. No, thank you for the work with the city of Madison. Oh, thank you. Yep, I love y'all in Madison. Y'all my people. I know there's a lot of burden for Black women carrying the weight of the world. Divest. So the question is, I know there is a lot of burden for Black women carrying the weight of the world. What are some tips you can give us for healthy self-care? So for me, it was divesting from the belief that the higher you go or the harder you work, that they will stop racism and sexism in you. It's going to exist. And so for me, that was the burden that lifted. I divested from their systems. I don't put too much in it. I prioritize Black women because that's what makes me feel good. Put us first. I make space for us. I pour my cup with my community. For me, my community care is bi-directional. So the reason I do all of this community work is because Sakara Wages is killed every day by all of these institutions. They extracting from me, sucking up, eating, clawing, scratching, and biting. All right. And so The only way I can move through is by being in communities who understand what I'm saying, who hear me, who love me, who appreciate me. And if I was to go into my Black community after being broke and take from them and extract from them, I'm as bad as the people who are doing it to me. So I have to invest in my community because they the only people who get me well. For me, there is no such thing as individual self-care. I only feel good when all my people good.
Thanks.
And when my community good, we good. So I think my answer is healthy self-care is collective self-care.
Oh, gee.
All right. Yeah, Jeremy's email will be at the end as well.
Gotcha.
I appreciate all of this. Thank you for verbalizing that. A change can and is happening. Oh, we love you, Jasmine.
Yeah, Jasmine.
I love you a lot, and I be hearing stories about you. Both of y'all energies are infectious. All right, y'all come to our podcast when we do it then, because it's just happening right now. We said we're gonna do it. Hey mama, my mama on here, y'all. It takes a village. I really appreciate the emphasis on the fact that we are taught from a white social work perspective. It needs to be a constant reminder for practicing social workers who are not Black and brown. I agree. I thank you for that comment. Any recommendations for dealing with a white folk doing case management that refuses to discuss racial things and uses her BIPOC staff and her, do I know you?
Right,
No.
sounds too specific.
Uses her BIPOC staff and husband for why she shouldn't have to engage in hard conversations. Feel like due to her abdication, I end up doing more. Oh, okay. So what it sounds like, what I'm hearing is we have a white staff member who has Black family and staff. And so because of that, that's her metric of I don't have to have the conversation because we got a Black husband.
Right, facts. Yeah.
So for me, first off, I remind white people that regardless of no matter how much work you do, you will always have factory defaults.
Just talk about that last week.
You have to constantly check your factory defaults for white folks. But how would I advise you dealing with that person? I don't know. Like I'd have to know your life situation because like I'm not gonna tell you to quit your job if you got kids, right? Me personally, I ain't got no kids, so I'm not I'm in there today in front of everybody. I purposely drive a $800 mom van because I don't have a car note. I'll quit right now. I don't have kids. I'll quit. I ain't got no, you can't make me. But it's my own like life view. And so I mean one thing I do is play aloof. That's a subversive tool I'll give you. Play aloof. Make them do more work by doing more work. Understand? Can you say more? Well, can you tell me what you're looking for? Oh my God, I hear you, but I'm just not understanding. And after a couple of those, and they realize they're gonna have to do the work anyway, they'll leave it alone. Those are the types of things I do, but I'm happy to like talk to you personally and think it through. Email me, human who I love and don't know. Anonymous attendee, what work do you do around getting Black women in the social work profession together to change and affect the change we are looking for? None right now. I would love to, right? But the reality is, right, every Black woman in social work is doing some free unpaid labor. And asking them to get together and find time is an additional constraint. And so I think my way of actualizing that, like I sort of said, is maybe a podcast. I don't know. I'm thinking about it in ways where as to not add more barriers to Black women's lives. We got mamas, daddies, kids, husbands, brothers, girlfriends, and yeah, so. Oh, she meant the we'll do it part. Because we did it.
I think you still got it.
Yeah. I think I got that part. I joined because the title was real. Can you speak of the difference of working in a community like Madison versus Platteville? I gotta do it because you actively work in Madison.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? No. You know what?
Let's look at the-
There is political things in the world, and I could speak on that, but I'm not, Nancy.
Right. I got things, but
I will just say this: there's a reason why I moved away from Madison back to Platteville, and there's a reason that the work I do in Madison is
that's nice.
virtual and separate, because the living conditions in Madison for Black people are horrible. I will also say the fact that I can rent a 4-bedroom, 3-bath duplex townhouse with a backyard and a 2-car garage for $1,200.
It's possible.
Never moving back to Madison. So. But that's the difference in the community, is the ability to be able to support oneself in one's community. So because, for instance, my rent is so low, when somebody call and say I need diapers, I got that, right? Whereas in Madison, I wouldn't have that. And the living costs wouldn't allow me to be able to do a lot of the social supports that I have. Even the rent for this spot, is much cheaper. I would never be able to have a commute. Not without staying in a hamster wheel of like earning. So the difference is I'm free in Platteville. And Madison wants you to be in a hamster wheel. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what I got for you.
I feel that. I feel that.
Where did you find your research? It seems like the research is so buried in the library. Oh, not Dr. Umar.
I saw that.
Well, I guess somebody did say we are lacking public intellectuals, so I'll take that. But I found the research because I was like, bro, there has to be, I want to hear from the very first Black women. It gotta be some social work in there. And that's what I did. I literally went to the first 3 texts that were written in firsthand perspective from Black women. And during doing that analysis, which even in my dissertation, we end up calling it a content analysis, but it was much deeper than that. I don't know what it was. But during that analysis, right, that's where I was able to find these survival efforts and survival works. Yeah.
Back to the defaults is weird.
It moved on me real quick. Okay. Okay. Madison has a nonprofit industrial complex. I am currently not operating as a nonprofit because the revolution will not be funded. That is written by Insight, who is a group of Black women who talk about their interaction with the nonprofit industrial complex. So if you are a Black woman and you are seeking to start a nonprofit, stop. Read that book and then see if you actually gonna be able to achieve your goals within that structure. It's a heavy yoke. Can you write that down? It's a book. I be loving books.
What's the heavy yoke?
Too heavy a yoke. Thank you. I love book recommendations. I'm not sure if you have an answer to this question, but there are events similar to this training. Are there events similar to this training for Black people? Just thinking about how my little sister and how helpful this I don't know, but you're giving me ideas. Right. The podcast, maybe that's, I don't know. Whatever, y'all. I love to talk to people. So just have your little sister hear my line. Like, we can get in the Zoom for 15 minutes and we can be friends about it, Hell, I even empower her on how to maybe be the leader of getting this started, within her group, rather than doing it myself. Like, so yeah, hear my line. Programs, advice, teens. Yeah, see, somebody gonna have to do it. Here's the thing, teens is hard because it gotta be led by them. I don't know, it just has to. These youth are brilliant. Yes, the same youth y'all talk shit about every day, they brilliant. When I get to talking this oppression talk, they much more intuitively engaged with it than many of my middle-aged 35 plus peers. And so I don't know the way to actualize it. The way to do it is to see what they want to do and if they want to do it. And recognizing that if they don't have space for freedom, recreation, and joy, that's what teenagehood should be about. I think we look at Black teenagers and be like, oh, we need to teach them advocacy and teach them.
Right.
They need to be running in a park, chasing girls and butterflies and kicking balls, And so, is that something that they want to do? And if it is something that they want to do, then that's the way you gotta let them lead it. It's not nothing that I don't think I could lead. Not surprised by the Black pioneer in social work that did not get credit. So glad to hear about it. Y'all, my dissertation gives the second paper, it gives a roadmap of though that's where the analysis of those women come from. And so if you really want to get into the different organizations they started and the different ways they started the organizations, that's a really good spot to start. And yes, that explains why the policies for social welfare don't leave you well. Child welfare don't leave you well.
Never been with
And Black women have always centered this love ethic. So you don't have to be my blood relation. You're a child of what, right? And so, yeah, that's the policies don't have love ethic in them. Yeah, I gotta go in there. Hold on. Okay. Just want to say I love how y'all shown up. Oh, we love you too. I do. You love it?
I love it. You love
I'm not open to mentoring female. Yeah. And I ain't even gonna charge them like they want you to, like the consultant industry. Just hit my line, man. I'll find time. Because again, like I said, if I'm having a shitty day and I get in a Zoom with a Black lady where we could just talk that talk, I can go finish that day. Like you actually helping me by hopping in a Zoom, sis. So
Right.
get into it. The name of the book that I recommended was The Revolution Will Not Be Funded, and it's by Insight, Incite. A marvel what y'all doing. I struggle with illnesses. Oh, well, you can still do things. I think this world is ableist and I'm not. And so regardless of what illnesses you have, we can find space time, even if just sharing your experiences, I think are important for helping us understand how to best shape our praxis, right? And so there are ways that you can get involved with us that don't require your physical ability. I love to just talk to you and hear how illness has affected your life, because that helps me help my community. Can I draw my dissertation in the chat? It is bit.ly, so bit.ly / capital B Black, capital SW. I'll put it in the chat. Maybe one of the ladies will. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna put it on the chat because that looks like the last question. bit.ly.
How do you remember that?
I made them so I can remember. My calendar is the same one, but it's Dr. Wages. See, I'm giving y'all away game free. Love it.
It's how it be though, don't it?
That's
all the time.
All right. So, and my calendar is the same / but it's so use the bit.ly thing.
I see that in the chat, and only we can see that, but I'll put it in the Q&A real quick.
Okay, cool, thanks. Okay. Somebody said they know them all. I missed that. I love that you know them all, and I love you for that. Thank you for seeing us. I think, is that all of them? Answered, not answered. Do you have a list? Yeah. So on my website, Subversive Social Work, I have some lists of some articles that fall in different categories. So, like, for instance, if you in a situation and your professor or job person told you, you in your feelings. I have articles to help you articulate how feelings are source of knowledge and why and how you are using them, right? Or just hit my line. Let's talk it through. I'll send you some books. Let me know what you wanna learn more about. I think that's it. Mhm. Any other questions? I love passion, sharing resource. Social worker, I'm curious on your thoughts on children being removed from their communities and placed hours away in communities they aren't comfortable in. That's a loaded statement because um children are removed from their communities and placed hours away, typically because of a lack of resources within the community, and that lack of resources comes because certain government entities may not see that community as fecund, well, and or safe. So I really can't comment on the way the current state is because we've all sort of just responding to shitty policies.
Right.
I think in an ideal world, child welfare would actually be well, and it would look something like the other mothering that went on in Black communities before the government stepped in. So again, going back to, under the constraints of state violence of slavery, yes, I have nothing. I'm a slave, but there is a child here who needs things. And so I'm going to do that. And not every person is restored and well. Every Black woman is restored and well enough to do that because they might have their own traumas, dramas, and issues that they've, that's in their legacy as well. But we are out there, right? And so supporting the communities is important. Like I've literally seen we send the money to the horse farm, the equestrian farm 4 hours away when it's a big mama on the corner that baby been sleeping in their house 3 nights a week anyway when mama and them been fighting. Why we didn't figure out a way to get her the money, right? And so yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. Probably not, but I'm sure it gave you something to think about, and that's okay with me. Oh, the link don't work. Shit, maybe I typed it wrong. I'll work on that. Email me. My email will be in the last slide. Once we get through, we're gonna wrap it up in a moment. Um, where am I from? What do you mean? What borders do I exist in front of? I don't believe in borders. I'm from the planet Earth. It's the reason you asking me that to make some assumptions. I'd much rather you tell me the assumptions you making because of where I say I'm from.
And she do this all the time, y'all. In work, when we working, when we playing, she come in like this, and then I'm in the back, like, what am I supposed to do with that? How do you come in next? Where do you go? Right?
Everywhere.
I just leave it alone. By that point, I leave it alone.
All right. Yeah. Okay, y'all. We gonna go ahead and wrap it up because I think we got like 30 minutes left. But left in our presentation time, but we just had a few more things for y'all, and we will give you some time back. This has been fun. I really do appreciate you, South Carolina in the house. All right. I think, Tamika, maybe you and Black Girls in Social Work. I think I've seen your name before. Maybe not. But yeah. So moving on, I'm going to close that out and we're going to bring this full circle back to Dr. Candia Bailey, right? Now, y'all just watched us live authentically in our fullness, right? And I think it's important to bring it back to Dr. Bailey and her findings from her research. So her major findings were basically said that attempts must be made to address the issues that confront African American women, such as being treated like the help or the outsiders, keeping them away from the table, having a voice and discounting their experience, skill set, and value to higher education because of their race, age, and gender. When the reality is, they've been treated us like outsiders. So we built our own tables and have done so historically, right? So that we can censor our own voices and lived experiences that draw from our race and gender and class, not because of, right? And so I posthumously appreciate my sister in the hood for leaving us with this call to action, right? And I want you all to think as you go into the rest of your days, right? How are you going to support the Black women-led community-based organizations in your area? What are you going to do to support Black women showing up the way we show up, right? Not having folks make assumptions because we use AAVE, right? Or because we move and talk with our hands how we talk, right? Who see that, censor that, and value that. What are you going to do to support that mission in future? And that's all we got for you today. Here are our emails. Please feel free to reach out to me or JP. I'm always happy to talk. I'm so personable. I said my goal for 2024 was to get in conversation with Black women. Right. And so, yeah, so let's text, let's talk. And we can write a paper about it. So throwing some love to Dr. Evans Winters. She has a book, Writing on Our Daughter's Body. And the last chapter of that book, she shows how she used text messages between her and one of her mentees as data, right? And so I think that's a good way to show like how us talking matters, right? Let's do that. So yeah, thank y'all very much. I don't know how we end this.
With shameless plugs. So y'all, if we do the podcast, come on, y'all. If we do the podcast.
Well, I love a podcast. I love a podcast. So you'll have one listener for sure. Well, we just want to thank you both so much for sharing your time with us and your expertise. I have a list of notes to think about after we end today, and I'm sure that other people in the audience do too. So we just really appreciate it. This was a really valuable hour that we spent with you. We want to thank everyone in attendance. There were about 160 of you here listening today. We want to and asking questions. So thank you for your commitment and efforts to confront racial injustice. We want everyone to watch for an email. There were questions about CEUs. Watch for an email with a link to complete an evaluation. We do share evaluation results with our presenters, and watch for a separate email regarding CEUs for those that requested them. We hope to see you all next week, February 2nd, for part 2 of this conference. And we hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you. Bye.